So good evening, everybody. It is such an incredible joy to be here with all of you tonight for part 2 of the 5 books in 5 weeks. And sadly, my brother Rabbi Aryeh Wolbe is not feeling well today, and I'm happily taking his stead from the 7 to 8 slot, and we'll do the regular 8 to 9 slot as well tonight. And then in a couple of weeks, when we're going to be finished with the 5 books in 5 weeks, he'll be able to do a double header in the Jewish history to catch up with the 5 millennia in 5 weeks. So, I just want to do a quick review. Last week we established that the type of book the Torah is not a book of laws. It's not a history book. It's not a story book. And it's not a book of recommendations. The Torah is a book of life. It's a book, a manual for living. You want to know how to live life? When a baby is born, last I checked, I may be wrong, but it isn't born. You're an OB, right? Tell me, is the baby born with a manual? No, right? It's not born with a manual. So how do we know how to raise that child? How do we know how to have a successful marriage? How do we know all of the incredible things that we need to learn throughout our lifetime, sometimes through trial and error? Well, the Torah tells us exactly how to maximize life. So that is, the book of the Torah is the book of life. Now, we established that there are 3 different elements. There are really, I would say, 2 different elements of the Torah. There's the written Torah, and then there's the oral Torah. It is impossible, and we've established this last week with multiple examples, it is impossible to observe the written Torah without the oral Torah. If you don't have the oral Torah, you don't understand fully the written Torah. It is impossible. You cannot fulfill the written Torah without the oral Torah. Because the written Torah tells you what to do. And the oral Torah tells you how to do. So yeah, the Torah tells you to put a mezuzah on your door, but it doesn't say what a mezuzah is. And it doesn't say what should be in it. And it doesn't say what portion should be in it. It doesn't say what side of the door it should be on, etc., etc. Just a beautiful idea if we're already talking about a mezuzah. You know that in halacha, we never have a compromise. There's no compromise in halacha. One side is right, and we follow that ruling. The other opinion can also be right, but we don't follow their ruling. Right? Well, you don't have, you say that the sukkah should be 20 feet, and they say it should be 10 feet. Let's just make a compromise, 15 feet. No. No such thing. It's either 10 or 20. Okay? Mezuzah, there are 2 opinions on mezuzah. One says it should be completely vertical, and one says it should be completely horizontal. So which one do we do? We put it on a slant. What are we, compromising?
Yes.
Yes, we are compromising. And our sages, in their infinite wisdom, right, taught us that specifically when you walk into a home, if you want to know the key to success in that home, look at the mezuzah. It's a compromise. It's a compromise. If you want to have success in a home, you need to have compromise. My Rebbe, one of my rabbis, would say that having a difficult roommate, this is back in yeshiva days, having a difficult roommate is an omen, a positive omen to have a good marriage. Right? Because you need to learn how to get along with someone who's not exactly your flavor, someone who's not exactly your style, someone not exactly, who thinks the way you think. Guess what? You're going to be married one day, and you're going to have to share a home and a life with someone who you don't see eye to eye with. And it's fine. It's perfectly okay. Okay, but you have to learn how to get along. Okay, so that's the mezuzah, the small lesson. But how would you know how to slaughter an animal? We know that in order to eat meat, right, it has to be from a kosher animal, and it has to be slaughtered properly. What's a kosher animal? Split hooves and chews its cud. Both of those conditions. And then it has to be slaughtered properly. How do you slaughter it? Doesn't say. Right, so go figure out how to slaughter an animal on your own. And other hundreds of examples from the 613 commandments that we don't just know from the written Torah. We need the oral Torah to explain it. And there are verses in the Torah that refer to the oral Torah as being that unwritten document that will have to forever be attached to that written document. So the obvious question is, if it's meant to be not written, so why do we have over here a beautiful set of Talmud? And that's the written Torah. I mean, the oral Torah written. Why? If it's supposed to be oral, let it remain oral. And the reason is because Rabbi Yehuda Hanassi, the author of the Mishnah, he recognized that his generation, the people were going to forget the Torah. They were going to forget the connection between the written and the oral. He said it's an emergency. We need to start writing it. And he didn't just write, item number 1, item number 2, item number 3. He wrote it in the most magnificent way, in the most engaging way, and in the most eloquent, obviously, but with making certain assumptions so that you learn how the system of Torah works. Now, last week, we gave out these sheets. If anybody online does not have it, you're welcome to email me. Anybody here who does not have it, do you have a copy, Jay?
I have.
Right?
I do.
Anybody over here that did not get one last week? You can just look at it. I just want to help you understand how the system works. The system of the Torah. Okay? So as you see up here, you have the 10 commandments, the 2 tablets that were given to the Jewish people. Right? Now, one of those tablets has the laws between man and God, and one of them, that's the first 5 commandments, and one of them is the laws between man and man. Now, it's very interesting. I saw once, someplace, they put 4 commandments on one side and 6 commandments on the other side. Because in their ignorance, they didn't realize that honor your father and mother is not necessarily a commandment of honor, of a mitzvah, a law between man and man. It's a commandment of between man and God. Because we all know that the Talmud tells us there are 3 partners to man. 3 partners to man. Who are the 3 partners to man? The father, the mother, and God. Right? There's the father, the mother, and God. Not having the proper respect to the father and the mother is a disrespect to the whole union of the father, the mother, and God. All right? So that's why it is placed on the side of laws between man and God. Then you have the laws between man and man. And we'll see this when we get to Exodus. We're going to talk more about this. Then you have the section here in the darker green. And the darker green section, you need some more? Here's some more. Have some around. There you go. Okay, so the next section here is the written Torah. And the written Torah, the written law, is comprised of 24 books, the 5 books of Moses, right? You have the 8 books of the prophets and the 11 books of writings. Now, anyone familiar with the book of Esther? Well, that's one of the books. You have the Song of Songs, that's one of the books. Ecclesiastes, if you look on the right here, we have the list of all the 24 books: Genesis, Exodus, Leviticus, Numbers, Deuteronomy. That's the 5 books of Moses, right? Then you have Joshua, Judges, Samuel, Kings, Isaiah, Jeremiah, Ezekiel, the 12 prophets, and we have that all listed there. And that's considered one book. You also have the writings, which is Psalms, Proverbs, Job, Song of Songs, Ruth, Lamentation, Ecclesiastes, Esther, Daniel, Ezra, Nehemiah, and Chronicles. So those are the 24 books of what we call Tanakh, the written Torah. Then comes the oral Torah, the blue section, right? And the blue section here is the first part of the oral Torah. I'm going to give you an example that if you've been to one of these classes before, you may remember, but I'll just refresh your memory, hopefully. if you have any doubts. So, if I ask you the following question, tell me what you understand. Okay? So when are we going skiing? No, I'm just asking. No, I'm not about that. Just us. When are we going skiing? Right.
Time you go.
There you go. Right. But when someone asks such a question, there's an assumption, right? I'm saying, so when are we having dinner? What dinner? I have no idea what you're talking about, right? So the way the Mishnah first begins, the first Mishnah of what we call the oral Torah, the oral law, begins with, from when do you begin saying Shema in the evening? Right? That's making big assumptions. What are the assumptions? That you say Shema in the evening. Right? And that's exactly the way the Mishnah writes it in that code, making all of these assumptions. By the way, correct assumptions. And then the Talmud's job is to now attack those assumptions. And the Talmud needs to resolve how those assumptions are accurate. You're going to bring a verse from the Torah. So what happens is like this. Here we go. We got the Mishnah. And the Mishnah is going to be asked by the Talmud, what are you talking about? When we say Shema in the evening? You're making assumptions. Who even said we say Shema in the evening? Oh, there's a verse. Where's the verse? We go up the chain in the Torah. The Torah tells us that you say Shema in the evening. Understand? So then the Talmud concludes that discussion, and then you go down to the third level here, which is the purple section, which is halacha. Halacha is the conclusion of those discussions. Right? And that's how Judaism is now. Today, if I came to you and I said, you know what, when you walk into synagogue, you have to clap your hands 3 times. Right? So you know what your question should be?
Who said that? Who said
Why? Well, tell me where. Show it to me. Don't allow anybody, and that's one of the rules we have here in this class, is that I don't always provide the source, but you're always welcome to ask for it, and I will share it with you. But don't assume that just because someone says something that it's correct. Investigate. Find the source. And if it's truth, you'll have a source. If it's not truth, you'll know. So, in halacha, it's very, very important to have a source. If you look on any page of halacha, whether it's the Mishnah Berurah, which you have over here at the bottom, you have the Shulchan Aruch, you have the Rambam, you always look at the outside edges of the page, and you'll see the source to where they got this source from, where they got this ruling from. So after the Talmud goes through each discussion and each conclusion, that's where the halacha is derived from. All right? We're good? So we understand the process and how the Torah laws work. Anybody who tells you that the rabbis made up these rules has to do a little bit more learning.
Definition of halacha.
Halacha is the way we actually observe the law. Okay? So, I would say, even you could say it's the code of Jewish law. But the code of Jewish law isn't the first document. It's the document that's after the Torah, the written Torah, after the oral Torah, and after all of those discussions, that's how we arrive at halacha. This is the conclusion. So technically speaking, you could open up a book of the Rambam, which is the first book of, and you'll see some of the Rambam's history in Rabbi Aryeh Wolbe's five millennia in 5 years series. He'll talk a little bit about Maimonides and what a controversial figure he was, because he was the first one to put the conclusion of Talmud in an organized fashion known as halacha. Right? And halacha is the Rambam was the first, and then you had a couple hundred years later, you had the Shulchan Aruch, and just as recently as the early 1900s, we had the Chafetz Chaim author the Mishnah Brura, which is like even more bottom line, what you need to know today. Right? And there are many other books we have here in the magnificent library, like the Sharei Halacha, like the Kitzur Shulchan Aruch, where you have, which is 5 shelves up, which gives you, from wake up to go till sleep, and including holidays, including kosher, including all the laws that can possibly be observed today, you have in those book of laws. Any questions?
So where does the Gemara fit in?
That's the Talmud. The Gemara is Talmud.
So I always thought that the Talmud was divided into the Mishnah and the Gemara.
It is. Right. The Gemara is Aramaic. It's Aramaic word for Talmud. All right. So the Mishnah is on its own. If you'd like, I can show it to you. I'll just 1 second to our friends on Facebook. Okay. So here is a Mishnah. I'll get the same one. So you'll see exactly. Okay, so here we go. So we have over here like this. We have the Mishnah. You see the Mishnah? Beautiful, beautiful edition of the Mishnah. And we have the Talmud. Okay? This is the Mishnah on Shabbat, on the tractate of Shabbat. And this is the Talmud on the tractate Shabbat. So in the Mishnah, right, we'll start with the first Mishnah in the tractate. And it says, Yitziot Shabbat, it talks about the different types of entrances and exits that you have between domains. Okay? That's the Mishnah. The Talmud now that we're gonna look at begins exactly with those same words, because he quotes the first Mishnah, and then we'll spend, here you go, Yitziot Shabbat Shtayim Shehin Arba. You have the exact same Mishnah right here, and then it gets to a point where it starts the Gemara, which is the explanation on that Mishnah, the investigation of that Mishnah. Okay? And the Talmud here spends a good, say probably, here you go, 11 pages. 11 Talmudic pages understanding that first Mishnah.
Going and coming.
Exactly. And then you have on page 11, the bottom of page 11, you'll have the next Mishnah. Okay, from here, from this Mishnah, it'll be quoted, and then the explanation of the Gemara or the Talmud. Okay? So that is the way to understand how the Talmud is explaining the Mishnah. And you have the Talmud right here. It's backwards to our friends online, I'm sorry. And then you have the Mishnah. So every word of halacha needs to be backed up with the conclusion of the Talmud, which is explaining a Mishnah, which is based on the Torah. You constantly, it always goes up in that order. You cannot just make up rules. Rabbis don't have any authority to make up rules that isn't based on Torah. It must be based on Torah. Okay? And there needs to also be between the rabbis a unanimous consent. Okay, but that's we could talk about a different time. Okay, so that's part number 2. Part number 3, we said, with the different names of the Torah, we said there's Torah, there's Chumash. Chumash comes from the term Chamesh, which is 5 in Hebrew. So now you know a Hebrew word, right? Chamesh, right? Uno, dos, tres, cuatro, chamesh. Okay?
That was good.
Okay. So that's the Chumash, which is the 5 books. And then we have the Pentateuch, and we know that in Greek it is the 5 scrolls. Right? Now it's very interesting to be called the 5 scrolls, because really the Torah is one scroll. Right? The Torah is not divided up into separate scrolls. But okay. We spoke about the themes of the Torah. The themes of the Torah, first we see is that the Torah is. I have a joke, but it's not. I'm going to leave it for after class. All right.
Nah.
What?
Come on.
Okay.
Come on. Tell us.
All right. So, what type of phone did Adam have? Apple. Okay. So.
But that came from Michelangelo.
Okay, but I'll tell you something. Okay, before we start part 2, I'll give you another one. Okay. So we have free will. Okay. We have free will. We have reward and punishment. We discussed. The common sense is a given. Right? It's like common sense is the baseline. Right? The Torah doesn't teach you common sense. Right? Common sense is a gift that God gave you in your mind, in your brain. Think. Right? Use common sense. The Torah doesn't teach you any commandments that are common sense. And there's no exception. Okay? And we also discussed why there are no warnings, seemingly no warnings to some things, right? To how is it possible that Adam, Cain, and Abel, Noah's generation, the Tower of Babel, right? They weren't given warnings. How can you punish them? Because there's common sense. Okay? Something which seemingly is missing in our generation. Common sense, okay? Life lessons. It's not stories. It's not a storybook. I can give you interesting storybooks. The Torah is not a storybook. The Torah is a book of life. Now, I would, and this is again an encouragement we spoke about last time, I encourage you to read the Torah cover to cover. And then know it. And study it and learn it. Right? It's not enough to just read it. It's not a New York Times article. It's life. Another thing we discussed was prophecy. It's the foundation of Jewish life. Future history is mapped out through the Chumash. It's timeless. It doesn't have a beginning or an end. And lessons of complete devotion and dedication from our ancestors, the patriarchs and matriarchs. We also have it's a unique book because any person at any level can understand it. A child understands it at the child level. An elder understands it at an elder's level. A seasoned scholar will understand it at his level. And it's not like, Curious George book. It's like there's nothing really to learn from it. It's like it is what it is. Well, not the Torah. Every time you learn it, you see something else. Every time you learn it, it's a whole different perspective. It's a whole new layer of understanding. Which is why we need to increase our reviewing of the Torah as we grow. That's why we do it every year in shul. We go through the entire Torah because you're constantly in a growth. You're constantly a bigger person, a better person. Learn it now, you'll see new things. Learn it next year, you'll learn new things. You learn it the year after, you'll learn even newer things. Okay? Who's the author? So we know God. God is the author. Right? There are certain facts that are impossible for Moshe to have known. There are certain promises that are impossible for any human being to make. Right? We discussed the accuracy of details. There's a clear transmission of the word of God through the hand of Moses. It was dictated by God. And all the Torah scrolls that are written must be written from an existing Torah scroll. And if there's a mistake in the Torah, we also explained that it may not be used until it is fixed. Okay. So now let's continue on our new part of this series. And that is as follows. Why doesn't the Torah begin from the commandments? Why does the Torah start with the creation? And we'll see this shortly. Why does it start? Let's just get to the point. Tell me what to do and finished. Do you want to hear something amazing? Rashi picks up on this right away. The first question Rashi, the greatest commentator on the Torah, The first thing, you keep passing me the Rashi Chumash right there. The red book, yeah, Bereshis. Perfect, excellent. Thank you so much. What a magnificent library. So, thank you so much. Let's see the first Rashi. Ah, this is amazing. Okay. In the beginning of, right, the Bereshis, in the beginning. Rabbi Yitzchak said, God need not have begun the Torah, but from this month shall be for you the beginning of the months, which is the first real commandment given to the Jewish people. But, okay, why? Because it's the first commandment, which Israel was commanded. What is the reason that he begun the book of Genesis, right, from the beginning of creation? What do we need it for? Give us the commandments. Mishum, it began thus because he wished to convey the message of the verse. Koach ma'asav higid liamo. The power of his acts, he told to his people. Laseis lehem nachlas goyim, in order to give them the estate of nations. She'im yomru umas ha'olam liYisrael, so that if the nations of the world will say to Israel, Listim atim, you are bandits. Shekvashtem, because you conquered Artzos Shiva Goyim, you conquered the land of the 7 nations who inhabited the land of Canaan. Heim omrim lehem, Israel will say to them, Kol ha'aretz shel HaKadosh Baruch Hu hi. The whole earth belongs to the Holy One, blessed be He. Hubra, He created it, unasana, and He gave it la'asher yashar be'enov, to the one found proper in His eyes. Birtzono nisana lahem, by His wish He gave it to them. Ubirtzono natlo mehem, and by His wish He took it from them. Unisana lanu, and He gave it to us. So Rashi here, this is the first Rashi. What is the most disputed land in the entire world? Israel. Right? Rashi goes on it right now. And Rashi wrote this 800 years ago. Rashi's telling us, you know why the Torah needed to start from the beginning? Because there's going to be a time where you're going to have the UN. And you're going to have all of the nations who are going to say, what? It belongs to the Palestinians. It belongs to this and that, right? This ignorance is not one of just today. It's ignorance of millennia. Where the nations of the world have always been disputing the Jewish right to the land. That's why the Torah, the universal Torah, begins from the beginning. Who's the creator of heaven and earth? Well, God is. And God decided who should get the land. And He said it should be the Jewish people. And therefore, it is the Jewish people. So the whole reason we have the beginning of the Torah, according to what Rashi says here, is to inform us who owns the land. That's it. The end. The beginning. Obviously. Right? But so we start from creation so that God can gift whatever He wants to whomever He wants. All right? Now, what is the biggest challenge that man has in this world? What is the biggest challenge? The biggest challenge we have is staying focused on our life's purpose. That's the biggest challenge we have. Whether it's good times or bad times, the challenge is always, how do I stay focused on my purpose in life? And that's the Torah. The Torah is here to be our guide, to get us to maintain that focus on what's important. That's why we're here. And the closer one is to Torah, the more focused they'll be. The more we distance ourselves from Torah, the more we wander. And the more we're all over the place and can't find why are we really here. Okay. So, I think there's one more point that we need to understand here, and that is that the purpose of all of the mitzvahs is to perfect mankind. That's why we have the mitzvahs. It's given to us so that we perfect ourselves. So why do we need 613 commandments? Right? Give us a few. You need 613. So our sages tell us, because how many commandments are there that are positive?
248.
248. Very good. And how many prohibitive commandments? 365. Corresponding to the 248 limbs and organs and 365 veins, arteries, and sinews. So every mitzvah that we perform, we're perfecting a part of our existence. And, God willing, on our Musar Monday class next week, we're going to be touching on this as well. We're going to talk about the topic of how to forego an embarrassment. Someone embarrasses you. Someone insults you. How do you overlook it? Right? And we're going to talk about that. And we're going to discuss how that relates to perfecting your essence, your body, and your spirit. But every single mitzvah that we do corresponds to part of our body and brings about perfection to it. Okay, so now I know we're doing 5 books in 5 weeks, right? And it's a speed through the Torah. But guess what? We're not the first to say, teach me Torah while standing on one leg. Right? We know that there was a soon-to-be convert who came to Hillel, who came to Shammai first, right? And asked Shammai, I believe, if I'm not mixing them up, right? Asked Shammai, can you teach me Torah while standing on one leg? So he shooed him away. Get away. Standing on one leg. So he went to Hillel. And Hillel says to him, Al da'aloch sani al tasa l'chavra. What is disliked upon you, don't do unto someone else. Right? What does that really mean? What does that really mean? What? Yeah, if you don't want something done to you, you don't like it when it's done. You don't like when someone embarrasses you. You don't like when someone insults you. Well, you don't like when someone leaves you out. Well, you don't like when someone doesn't give you credit. You don't like when someone ignores you, right? So don't do that to someone else. How does that relate to the whole Torah?
What's all about?
I understand, but we're talking about godliness. We're talking about bringing offerings. There are a lot of different components. That is it.
Loving your neighbor as yourself.
But that's not what he said. He said, don't hurt your fellow. Don't do something that you hate to someone else.
That's different than love, right?
So I think that it all boils down to a relationship with God. Right? God doesn't do to us something. Right? It means God does for us only things that are good for us. Do you want to know the essence of God? Do you want to know it all on one foot? All stand. God only does good for you. God doesn't want to do bad for you. He only does good for you. So if God does only good, does he do bad for us? He doesn't do bad. God doesn't do anything bad. There are things that God does to us that we may perceive as being bad because we're weak in our faith, because we don't understand the full picture. It's like, imagine you see someone chopping down a tree. You're like, why are you destroying a tree? It's a beautiful tree. Why are you destroying it? Well, we're gonna. If you stop right there, it looks like a terrible thing. You're destroying creation. But they take that tree and they make it into wood and they build homes so that people can live. And there's a lot of great purposes. The paper that we print on, right? This was once a tree, right? So there are a lot of great purposes. So you can't just look at one part of a story without understanding the full extent of it. So when it comes to the mitzvah of don't do unto, or this message of don't do unto your fellow what you don't want unto yourself, that is the idea of God doesn't do unto you anything that he doesn't want done to himself. Don't ignore God, right? Don't do things harmful not to that relationship, right? It's all about the relationship. Right? Don't do something that's harmful to your fellow. What's the greatest relationship on earth? Who loves us more than any other human being on earth?
God does.
God. Right? Just like you don't want to hurt somebody else, don't hurt the relationship with the Almighty. So in essence, what Hillel is telling him here is that you want to know what the Torah is in one step? Relationship. Standing on one foot. It's all about relationship. All of Torah. Now you know it. So what we're going to do is we're going to go through now. We're going to begin. You know what? If you want, we can take an early break now. This is the end of the introduction. All right? And then we're going to begin in about 5-10 minutes. We're going to begin the first part of the Torah. And we're going to go through all of Genesis, hopefully in the next hour. So we'll stop here for a coffee break. We'll stop for snacks. And then we will resume very shortly with Genesis. All right? So our friends online, we'll see you shortly.